Number one, Trump never said neo-Nazis or white supremacists were very fine people. Number two, he said that some people on both sides of the statue argument were very fine people. That's the short version of Charlottesville. Before we get into this, I wanted to ask you, if you like this video, please subscribe, also share and like. Thanks so much. Many of the issues we find unsolvable contain the solution within. And for some reason, we're not getting the full story, we're getting omission. Hi, I'm going to give you an example of a fact that most people don't know they should even be looking for. A lot of these things come in the basic documents that we all know about, we just haven't read. Example, the Articles of Secession by the slave-owning states in the southern United States before the Civil War. I was prompted to do some research after the Charlottesville debacle, in which there were two distinct controversies. One was about the removal of the statue of Robert E. Lee at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. The other, held the night before, was a strange spectacle of young men and women in khakis carrying tiki torches and shouting anti-Semitic slurs. This spectacle was repeated in November 2021. Then gubernatorial candidate Glenn Youngkin visited Charlottesville in his bid to become Virginia's governor. Naturally, the national media were all over it, showing that there was yet another rally celebrating hate and anti-Semitism. By the end of the day, the anti-Trump Lincoln Project took responsibility and said they were trying to tie Glenn Youngkin to Donald Trump. It makes me wonder what the original event was designed to do. Tie Donald Trump to hate and anti-Semitism? I had talked to some young men who were part of a political group called the Confederate Army, and they had different military titles, but it was just a political group as far as I knew. So I wanted to know what they really thought about the statues and the Confederate flag. They submitted the argument that the North was just as racist as the South, if not more, and that the Civil War was not about slavery, it was about money. These young men also claimed that slavery was going away on its own, because it just didn't seem right. It didn't sit right. The Articles of Secession, I decided, okay, I'll go look at them. And that was one of the first times that I went and looked at a source document that I didn't think I really needed to look at, but just for, shits and giggles. Go in there, it says right there very clearly that slavery is an essential institution, benevolent even, and that slaves are their property. All the states pointed the finger at abolitionists for interfering with their commerce, and multiple times accused abolitionists of trying to incite insurrection. In other words, a slave revolt, or what they called a servile war. Sound familiar? Once again, the powers that be are in constant fear of insurrection, refusing to acknowledge that anyone is suffering as a result of their policies, let alone offering a redress of grievances. That was a very big reason for the Civil War, and everybody knew it. There were other reasons, but a lot of times they might have been an effect of the situation with the slave trade. Why am I talking about this? I think that the whole issue of the Confederate statues and the Confederate flag and the Civil War and the different arguments about it is a divide and conquer tactic. We really haven't been taught in a way that would be productive and unifying. Beginning in 2015, statues started coming down. There are about 2,000 statues around the country, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, that commemorate Confederate generals or leaders. Most of them, I guess, were put up either around the anniversary of the Civil War in the early 1900s or in the 1960s, which was actually the 100th anniversary of the Civil War. And according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, they were designed to intimidate the population. Like everything in our world, I think that some of this is true for a lot of instances. However, I ask you, wouldn't it be better to put the decision to dismantle a statue to a vote rather than having a mob go and do it for a spectacle? I can understand the spectacle, and I probably wouldn't punish someone that hard if they climbed up like that woman did in South Carolina and took down the Confederate flag. The problem is we need to understand each other. Now, leading up to Charlottesville, there were many events where people would go to protest the removal of a statue, and then other people would go as counter-protesters, and they were getting in fights. Then we have this Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, supposedly around the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue. And I always wondered, why were there weird-looking young men and women shouting, "Jews will not replace us," around the statue of Robert E. Lee? What did they have to do with the statue removal? Well, this is what I think. I think that the statue removal got people there, got a lot of people to come, and that drew more attention to this spectacle, which was, as Joe Biden said in the debate, people running out of the forest with torches saying, he didn't repeat that, but that's what they were saying. They were talking about our Hebrew brothers and sisters. All this was the backdrop to the violence that broke out after police closed down the rally and herded everyone into the downtown area. That is where someone came with a Dodge Charger and killed Heather Heyer, drove right into the crowd, and Heather Heyer did not make it. Very, very sad. President Trump was asked about it. Now, the first day he said there's no place for hate. I think he, like most of us, thought it was all about a statue. He spoke the next day, and he was still talking about the statues when he said, there are very fine people on both sides. Now, there are some who would take exception to that. And there are also others who would take exception to him saying that about neo-Nazis and white supremacists. Well, there were some white supremacists who I think were there just in the general rally, but there were also white supremacists who were marching around with tiki torches the night before. But he said immediately after, in the same sentence, not the neo-Nazis or the white supremacists, because they should be condemned totally. But finally, Snopes, the big fact-checking site, very successful, came out with a fact-check on that just on June 20th, 2024. And they said, no, he did not say that neo-Nazis or white supremacists were very fine people. Wow, I thought maybe they'll get some backlash. Well, they got a lot of complaints because they said it seemed like they were saying that this was true, that there are very fine people on both sides. You see, there are some people who are so extreme that they think that the debate about the statues is just a non-starter also, and that anyone who would support keeping those statues up is a bigot or a racist. We have to understand that people are taught by their fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers, or great-great-grandfathers who would have fought in the Civil War and then handed this experience down to them. Many people do believe in this argument about the North being more racist than the South, and that the Civil War was more about money. That is why I was so shocked when I pulled up the Articles of Secession. I wrote to these young men, and then I never heard back. So number one, Trump never said neo-Nazis or white supremacists were very fine people. Number two, he said that some people on both sides of the statue argument were very fine people. I would say that that is true because I have spoken to them. What we need, though, is to have everyone in the same room when we hear these facts and have no judgment, make some ground rules, and I think we'd have people hugging each other like, oh my God, we were divided, we were deluded, we thought you were the enemy, but really just a lack of information was the enemy, spin of omission. So that's the long version of Charlottesville. Let's get back to basics. Let's get back to the basic facts. All right, see you soon.